For those guests joining us as part of the highlights ticket and as a reminder for the rest of us, over the past 2 days, attendees of the summit have been working together in 6 action areas to share ideas and information to inform an action plan to advance equitable access to nature. So that's what we're going to be sharing out with those action plans. As you'll hear, some of these action plans are well established, and the action areas, the group, the work that's been going on has been going on for some time, and this was a good touch point in our ongoing work. Some of our action areas are more nascent, and this was an opportunity for folks to come together to begin to envision what work might look like going forward. So the goal for these report outs is just to share across action areas, if you will, for each of us to get to hear what happened in the rooms that we weren't in, and to find connectivity and places where we can leverage solutions across the action areas. We encourage you to reach out to folks in other action areas if you hear a connection point or have ideas sparked for collaboration. And I want you to also know that we will be using the work that's been done over the past couple of days to inform our planning over the next year. So our first action area report out is going to come from Monica Lopez-McGee, my wonderful colleague at the Children in Nature Network, and she will share out the work that happened in the cities and nature action area. Monica?
Well, thank you for passing it on, and so exciting to hear of the different developments in the multiple action areas. My name, once again, Monica Lopez-McGee, pronouns she, hers, and I'm joining you from Austin, Texas, indigenous land of the Humanos, Tonkawa, and Comanche. And I was pleased to be a part of the Cities and Nature action area. And I was joined in planning and facilitation by a suite of partners who really made this come together. We can move to, yeah, perfect. And that includes the National League of Cities, Reimagining the Civic Commons, City Parks Alliance, New City Parks, and National Recreations and Parks Association. These partners helped us really ground or get a big scan view of what is happening as trends across the nation. And with that, we were joined, these are our partners who came together to help plan and facilitate. And then we were joined by participants from 37 cities. So we were joined by representatives from different agencies and sectors within city government, as well as community leaders who are working at a citywide level and different agencies, sectors to advance equitable access to nature. So really inspiring to see the showcase, and that as we think of this work and with city leadership, how can it look different and complement all the grassroots efforts that we've heard about thus far. And so as we started our action area, we set our intentions around exchanging strategies and practices for securing resources for public space and children's access to nature. We know that how valuable nature is, but that the resource allocation, the funding, the staff time is not always dedicated in that space. We also set out to help our city and community leaders make the case for city efforts to increase children's equitable connection to nature, to related fields that they may operate in, that including sustainability and resilience, health and wellness, academics, et cetera. Throughout our 2 days, we included some city highlights that drew us for inspiration and a little bit of aspirational. Albuquerque, who shared with us their partnership with their city partnership with the National Park Service, and really seeing that interplay of national and local and how they can leverage resources together to bring children out to those national park sites. We heard from Austin and how they were leveraging resources among different departments, leveraging the park dollars with dollars from their water protection department, from their urban forestry, and their Office of Sustainability. So how do we build those resources across departments? And then we heard from We Walk Philly, to hear about how they're building public will and momentum and tapping into dollars across for their initiative. As we moved on, we coupled these city highlights with some really intense time in breakout groups where we, for that first day, we focused on that learning and discussion around growing and sustaining resources. We identified resources at all levels. Oftentimes city governments look at that local, and we know that that is where the biggest opportunity is to sustain the work. But we also said, how can state and federal dollars be leveraged? We took a lens of this, if you were on our Monday discussions, we took a lens of this as those explicit conditions of systems change. How are we garnering resources through policy and practices, and even starting to look at partnerships? Then our day 2 started to focus on actively applying some of those tools and resources through workshopping exercises that really ask participants to step out of their comfort zone and craft messaging, and then practice that messaging in front of their peers. And so we believe that that helped to really ground ourselves in the realization that each of us serves as an advocate in this work, and that it's critical that we craft our message, and crafting our message not only for what we believe is important, but who it is we're seeking to reach out to, particularly as these city agencies and city partners try to look to build public will and engage mayors. During our session, we got news of the results of Breonna Taylor, and we really sat with that, and it helped to ground us in the work that we have to do to create not only access to nature, but equitable access to nature. And then we closed out with really saying that, going back to that idea that each person, each of us has, looking at those power dynamics and those relationships and networks, to say each of us is a voice, and how can each of those city and community leaders continue to advocate and be the messenger in their communities. And so we believe that kind of next up, that hopefully everybody in our group is primed with that, and we'll follow up with resources. And throughout this, we shared a wealth of resources from the partners, including City Parks Alliance, noting their new Equity Urban Park Systems Resource Hub around funding, national NRPA's park metrics data, and then our CCCN initiative, which is the partnership, our Cities Connecting Children to Nature initiative, which is our Children Nature Network's partnership with National League of Cities, where we have a goal of doubling the number of cities from 18 to 36 by 2024. And so that'll include a launch of new cohorts in early 2021, where we'll be providing technical assistance grants to invite different cities to join us. So we also know that this is an opportunity for our city and community leaders to continue engaging in this work through the resources that partnerships have to offer and our upcoming cohort that we will launch. And with that, I turn it over to Pascal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pascal Vanderleest. I work with Parks Canada, and I'm joining you from Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is the traditional and unceded land of the Mi'kmaq First Nation. And a big project that I work on is called Nature for All. And the International Action Area was a collaboration between the Nature for All Network and the Children in Nature Network. And I'd like to take a moment just to thank those that helped me to plan this action area, which include Janani Eswar, Nathan Cretan-Kelly, Luis Camargo, Lais Fleury, and my colleagues at Parks Canada, Isabella Balsarzak and Jose Cormier and Marie-Philippe Ouellet, who made this possible. If we go to the next slide. So this is a random screenshot, as you can tell, of some of our action area participants. I really just like to acknowledge the contribution of everyone in this group, and also their generosity in joining us. The time zones were really challenging for some of them, but they joined in and they participated the whole time. We had people joining at like midnight, 2 a.m. We had participants from Europe and the UK, from Africa, India, Australia. So it was a great diverse group of individuals. If we go to the next slide. So I just wanted to take a minute to, I guess, kind of explain where this action area came from, because this summit is the first time that I guess we've offered a group focused on international action. So for those of you who may not be aware, Nature for All is a global movement to inspire love of nature. It's led by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and particularly two of their commissions, the World Commission for Protected Areas and the Commission for Education and Communication. It started 4 years ago with about 10 organizations who believed that they wanted to launch a movement to inspire love of nature, and an open invitation. Anyone who saw value in that and agreed that it was important to connect people with nature were welcome to join. 4 years later, we have over 400 organizations as part of our network, representing 70 different countries, I think, right now. So about a year ago, Children in Nature Network have been a very active member of the Nature for All global network since its launch. So we started talking about the value of creating a space kind of to recognizing that there had been at past meetings, there had been kind of gatherings of international groups, but the importance of kind of and a need to create a space for the international community to come together and to kind of focus explicitly on fostering that sense of community. So that's where the international action area came from. And if we go to the next slide, yeah, we'll see that kind of what we, oh, sorry, go back one. Yep. So Dr. Cheryl Charles was a really important individual who in creating this space, and she kind of provided the guidance that, we should focus on community, creativity, and commitment. So, community was a big part of this international action area. We spent quite a lot of time just meeting each other, learning about our relationships to each other, the relationships that we had in our own broader networks, and a lot of time sharing stories of how global issues were affecting us as an international community. And obviously the current COVID pandemic was the big global story that took up a lot of time, but also giving space to kind of our more local cultural conversations and our personal stories as an important way of building community. We learned a lot from each other. I think, I learned a lot in terms of creative approaches to our work in connecting children with nature. There's so much that we can learn from each other internationally that is applicable and useful for our work at a local level, and creative approaches to this work. I think the biggest thing we wanted to focus on was the idea of commitment. So helping this group know that there is a community that is committed to children and nature, that they are part of, that we are all committed to helping and supporting and inspiring one another as practitioners and researchers, and hopefully going home with kind of a refreshed commitment to our work in our own kind of local home base, knowing that we're part of a bigger movement and a bigger community worldwide that's there for us to lean on. If we go to the next slide, some of our key discussion points. So a lot of emphasis with the Nature for All, and I think also with Children in Nature Network, there's kind of a growing recognition of the importance of storytelling when you're talking about connecting people with nature, and the idea of love of nature and sharing love of nature and creating inclusive and welcoming spaces. So we spent quite a lot of time sharing our own stories, but also talking about the value of doing so and making space for that. We spent some, part of our sessions were focused on equity and access. And we kind of were challenged to think about how personally and professionally we can create moments of connection, particularly for marginalized groups, because what we heard from our presenter Nathan is that all it takes is one moment to dramatically change someone's life if you create the space for that. So how do we create moments for connection for all and create spaces that are welcoming for all? How do we, as people who many of us work in the conservation sector, so how can we constantly ask ourselves who is missing from the table, and how can I ensure that I'm creating a table that is welcoming and inviting to them? And then in terms of an international focus, today we talked a lot about the idea of meta principles and recognizing that it can be really easy to talk about what's different amongst us and what's different in how we do our work. But when we want to talk about, inspiring love of nature, or, connecting people worldwide of nature, or nature for all, not hashtag nature for all, but nature for _all. It's important to recognize the commonalities that connect us, and how these link to creating a thriving world for all beings, not just humans, but all beings and all living things on our planet. And on our last slide, so looking ahead, one challenge that we talked a lot about was finding a mechanism to keep this, the desire to stay connected as a community, but finding a mechanism that works for everyone. And particularly, what emerged is that even virtual connections, which are so important, and even pre-COVID were used a lot for those of us who work in the international space, for many regions of the world, where you're still paying, per message that you're sending on WhatsApp or something like that. Those aren't really equitable platforms to work on. So that's a real kind of challenging place where we ended off, and that we'll definitely want to look at. For Nature for All and Children in Nature Network, how can we be regionally present and more regionally diverse? And I don't mean regionally within like United States or North America, but regionally, internationally, so that everyone kind of sees themselves reflected in our movements and in our networks, and knows that they are accessible to them. And then again, which I mentioned before, but who is missing? That was a conversation that came up that seemed to be, with the COVID pandemic, we recognize that what has become really apparent is how important it is for people to be connected to nature, and nature for our health and well-being as individuals, but also socially and as a planet. But also, it also revealed some very hard realities about access and equity within kind of the nature space. And that's a truth that I think was pretty much resonated internationally. And so those are kind of the questions, I guess, that we'll want to explore and continue to explore as, our small little international action area, but hopefully expanding out to welcome in others and to grow that community. And on our I think my last slide is what's next. Yeah, so we ended today on a note, just reflecting that we are nature. It can be very easy, and in many places, a dichotomy has emerged where humans are somehow separate from nature. But ultimately, we learn this, and we know this a lot from indigenous and traditional wisdom, so that humans, of course, are nature, and we're all part of it. And that connection between humans and all other living things is absolutely essential for our own health and well-being, but that is the planet as well. And I just threw down here some of those kind of meta principles that we landed on, the things that we share in common and that connect us and connect our work internationally. And then just the Nature for All website, if you want to check that out, I invite you to check it out. Everyone is welcome to join as part of this movement, and to join Children in Nature Network and others in this work that we're doing globally. And there's lots of great resources available there as well. And I thank the Children in Nature Network for making space, for really intentionally trying to foster an international community and replicating the success that you've had in the United States internationally.
So it's my pleasure to introduce our Health Action Area report out to kick us off. And our friends at the Community Initiatives Network, I'll be on screen, there we go. My name is Jory Emery, by the way. I am the Director of Network Engagement here at Children in Nature Network. And I had the pleasure of sitting in with the Health and Nature for Community Wellbeing Action Area. Our friends at Community Initiatives helped us plan this action area. Monty and Elizabeth have been fantastic. We do have some new friends that are going to help us report out, though. We've got Danny Auberd, Jennifer Boley, and Nathan Upman. So please welcome those three to help us report out.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my computer wouldn't unmute for a moment. My name is Danny Aboud. My pronouns are they, them, and I have had so much fun the last 2 days as part of this action area, and I am excited to tee up our report a bit here and talk a little bit about our intentions as a group. We've had a lot of great discussion over the last couple of days, as I'm sure everyone did within their various action areas, and we are excited to share our thoughts with you all. Originally, our group's area is titled Health Action for Advancing Community Wellbeing, and we really wanted to expand beyond the concept of just health and really get to that core mission of well-being for both communities and individuals. So we really just honed in on our original goal more intentionally, moving beyond a more narrow lens of health towards a more all-encompassing concept of well-being that centers racial justice, equity, and the idea of looking at health through a holistic framework of what it means not only to be well physically and mentally, but to thrive, both for individuals and for the communities they exist within. And with that, I'll pass more of the details off to Jennifer.
So we had a few key discussion points. Under connection, we want to create community by sharing stories, memories, perspectives, and experiences. And there were a few areas that came into this. One is legacies. We want to acknowledge legacies of trauma and exclusion. We also want to celebrate legacies of inclusion. And both of those can be impacted by connections with nature. We also want to look ahead to legacies we can create together among colleagues, among our communities. We feel that it's important to center youth voices in leadership, ideas, thinking. We've heard through the course of some of our discussions yesterday the power of youth leadership through the Prevention Institute, K-Vibe, Active Minds, and others. There are some really creative ways to use nature for healing and building community in new ways, in addition to using traditional ways of creating those connections. We also want to make sure we're building relationships across sectors. So there are some ways that even in the general public health realm, we can create partnerships. We see partnerships in the Parks Inventory, the Minnesota State Health Improvement Plan, and then there's the mental health area, and then just healthcare in general. And it's important that we work within not just a national level, but also within the communities that we're working directly with to create those connections across sectors within our communities. And then the vital conditions list is a great thing to revisit, and I don't know if you're able to pull up that slide, but especially there are ways that things on our vital conditions list can intersect: transportation, housing, education, and we should be looking into those cross connections. We want to explore ideas and collaborative frameworks for working across sectors. And so this Thriving Together, a springboard for equitable recovery and resilience in communities across America, is a great resource and a great tool to look at there. And I'm sure we're going to share that in our chat, the link to that document. And with that, I will turn it over to our next colleague.
Hey everyone, I'm Nathan Utman and really excited to learn more about what everyone else is doing and figure out how we can move forward together. My area focuses on next steps, so I'll try and put a unifying frame by emphasizing seed and soul and soil. And so starting with soil, we are really looking at how much we owe to both our ancestors and to the children that have brought us together. So really honoring the perspectives and worldviews heavily represented by Indigenous people and traditional ecological knowledge that see themselves and ourselves as people, as one with our shared home on planet Earth and with the rest of the community of life. And so we feel like some seeds are planted, some beautiful seeds in that soil within each of us as individuals and with what we are actively shaping and co-creating together, and really looking at the soul of what this movement is moving towards. So really to appreciate the amazing work that has already begun, the Children in Nature Network for bringing us together and giving the framework for us to be a part of a beautiful, dynamic, growing community that truly honors children and looks to partner with children, working together with them to see how we can ensure that this is a livable planet where all of life can thrive. And so again, we have a very broad idea about what health entails, and we're looking forward to learning about what the other focus groups talked about. And again, that this is a starting point. We're looking forward to co-creating, collaborating together as we build towards a better and brighter, beautiful future together. Thank you.
Our next presenters were from our international action area, and I just received word that Pascal just had a Zoom issue, so she's going to log back in. We can go ahead and move to our next presenters, the Green Schoolyards team. That's slide number 20, Nick.
And I was actually worried about how Pascal was going to, maybe not worried, but try to pronounce my name. So I'm Jamie Zaplatosh. I'm the director of Green Schoolyards for Healthy Communities with the Children in Nature Network, and I go by she, hers. Can you advance the slide? So as many of you know, we shifted our summit from in-person to a delay to virtual, and these partners that are here on this screen were with us every step of the way, designing and creating the action area agenda and helping to implement it throughout the last couple of days and all the planning going up to it. So thank you all. Next slide. And in particular, we had two objectives for our action area. One was to advance this vision that all U.S. communities offer access to green schoolyards by 2050 to enhance children's healthy development, community well-being, and positive environmental impacts. That action agenda was signed at our leadership summit in 2018 and has been endorsed by additional folks since then. And we've been slowly and organically working on accomplishing all of the tasks that have been listed on that agenda. So that was one of the objectives of this session, was to continue movement and momentum around this shared agenda, and also to support the development of a national network of colleagues that are advancing this work. Next slide, please. So to do a little bit of ground setting, we did delve into the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, which is really supporting so much of what's needed right now. And we're really grateful for the partners that you see on this slide that have been advancing this work across the country. And if you don't know about it, we highly recommend you check it out. It is in our Finding Nature site as well. Next slide. And the Trust for Public Land also shared mapping tools to help identify where green schoolyards might be the most effective in both local jurisdictions as well as across the country, and depending on data sets. And so that was actually a big hit of the action area. Next slide, please. We had many different breakout topics that we discussed, and this actually was the bulk of our session was really focused on this. And you can see the folks that, at least some reference to the folks that facilitated these sessions. And so we were rolling up our sleeves, having good discussions, and doing a lot of interactive activity around each of these topics. And I would say the last thing, thank you, Emily, for adding the COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiatives link in the chat. Based on all of our discussion and the presentations, there was really closing wish to really focus more on group and local advocacy for policy change and things that we can only do together that we can't do alone. So talking about if we're really trying to make green schoolyards a reality across the country and in every community, how do you create district level design guidelines that include green schoolyard features? How do you integrate child-focused design into cross-sector professional network trainings, and what other case-making tools do we need, like better access to GIS tools like the ones that TPL shared, Trust for Public Land shared. So that's going to be it for me, and I think we're going to go right ahead to Jenny Mulholland Beers, who is going to be presenting on the Advancing Policy for Equitable Access to the Outdoors.
Hi, thank you, Jamie. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Mulholland Beers with Inclusion Outdoors. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm calling in from the Muwekma Ohlone territory in Berkeley, California. I had the privilege of co-facilitating the Advancing Policy for Equitable Access to the Outdoors Action Area, along with my phenomenal colleagues, Martin LeBlanc from LBC Action, Robin Palikas from Meridian Institute, Sarah Bodor from NAAEE, Janie Rasmussen from Sierra Club and Oak, and Dylan McDowell from the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. I want to thank these facilitators, our tech support team, presenters, and especially the participants for their active engagement over the last 2 days. We had two main outcomes for our time together: to position the outdoors around racial equity and justice in an age of COVID recovery, and to create a policy action plan for 2021 at the intersection of health, recreation, and outdoor learning. We grounded ourselves in this framework to explore ways in which policies provide opportunities for breaking down silos between the sectors of recreation, outdoor learning, and health, while always keeping equity at the center of our approach. We learned about a number of state policies to expand equitable access to the outdoors. California Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia shared information on Proposition 68, a $4.1 billion bond that provided $725 million to expand access to the outdoors in park-poor neighborhoods. Minnesota Representative Jamie Becker-Finn shared information about No Child Left Inside grant program in Minnesota. And State Senator Sheikh Rahman from Georgia talked about how important this issue is for him and his diverse constituents, and how excited he is to bring these policies to Georgia. And while this panel took place yesterday, Senator Rahman joined us today to learn from the other presenters and policies that he can work with in Georgia. He spent the full 2.5 hours with us today, and it was incredibly inspiring to all of us to have his ongoing engagement throughout the 2 days together. During the panel, a theme that arose was the need for really meaningful community engagement in all policies to make sure that the voices of the people most affected by the policies are being heard and that their needs are met. Next slide. We had 3 lightning round presentations to give us more information on additional policies. Mark Bareka and Danica Carey presented on Recreate Responsibly and Outdoor Offices of Recreation. Sarah Bodor presented on the outdoor learning state policies in multiple states. And Representative Angelica Rubio presented on the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Fund. The heart of our session was to create a framework for a 2021 state policy action agenda, looking at policies related to outdoor learning, grant programs, and recreation. So I'll give you a quick summary right now of what those policies were that were discussed today. For outdoor learning, to echo a lot of what Jamie just said, reopening schools is a huge priority for so many people right now for so many reasons: the economy, mental health, social emotional learning, academic achievement. So we talked about the initiative that Jamie mentioned, the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, and its efforts to support schools to use the outdoors to open safely in the short term, but how it's also a huge opportunity to move the needle forward for outdoor learning for the long term. We talked about how this is presenting opportunities for new partnerships, and it is in fact very dependent upon many, many partnerships to be successful. And the need for school districts to really collaborate with their public health officials. That they're looking to public health guidance in order to find out when it's okay to open, but that there's a need for public health offices to call out outdoor learning explicitly and also to get unions on board. We talked about joint use agreements and more collaboration between agencies so that outdoor classrooms could open up in parks and other outdoor spaces off of school grounds, and to expand outdoor school for all model to include nearby nature experiences that could be provided on a more regular basis, to the amount and to the same type of vision for outdoor school for every child. In terms of outdoor learning grants, some of the next steps that came out of it were to review existing grant programs to include more direct equity provisions. So in examples in Washington State, where they mapped areas that are underserved in order to specifically target them for grant funds, and also to reduce or remove the match requirements for those underserved communities. To create more collaboration between departments in 2021 to make funding possible in the future, and to find ways for these departments to work together, to build coalitions, such as between hospitals and parks, and to include outdoor requirements in bond measures, so such as having school construction that ensures outdoor access as part of the funding, as a way to incentivize the construction of outdoor spaces for outdoor learning. And finally, we talked about recreation policies. So we looked at Every Kid Outdoors in state parks and talked about opportunities for connecting stakeholder. We talked about Parks RX, and Senator Rahman from Georgia, when he joined us today, specifically talked about creating an outdoor study bill with the health community, which is an excellent example of cross-sector collaboration. And also an opportunity to apply federal policy from the Outdoors for All funding into thinking about how to apply that to state and local level and identify funding. We're so grateful for all the participants, facilitators, and speakers for your active engagement and the passion and expertise you brought to our time together. Next week, Robin Palikas from the Meridian will be facilitating a policy workshop on both days. So you're welcome to join us and continue the conversation. Next up, we will hear from Nature Connection for Youth Development, presented by CJ Golding.
Thank you, Jenny. And following your example, well, my name is CJ Golding. I use he, him, his pronouns and calling from Lenape Land in New Jersey. I would also like to extend gratitude to my co-presenters and the folks who helped build this conversation over the past couple of days and over the last year in preparation for these 2 days. So that's Kathy Jordan. That is our partners at the Search Institute and their work in developing the framework. That is the organizations who have been part of the cohorts in Atlanta and in Grand Rapids. And my colleague, Monica Lopez McGee, who's had an equal, if not more, role in helping to develop these thoughts, ideas, and materials. Our goal and our intention in this session is to highlight and to examine the impacts of and encourage promising strategies towards the intentional integration of positive youth development and nature connection practices and principles. This started with the development of a literature review that by Search Institute based on their studies and expertise in the area of positive youth development, and understanding what can happen when youth development and nature practices and principles are intentionally integrated. During this day 2, we defined a good practice at the youth development and nature intersection, setting goals and actions that will move participant organizations toward intentional integration. I should recognize that that the cohort work that's been done in Atlanta and Grand Rapids has been done through the support of the S.D. Bechtel Jr. Foundation. So thank you to them as much for supporting the conversations and the work that we are able to do with those communities. We asked organizations the question, where does your organization sit at the intersection of youth development and nature engagement? And before I get into that, as we talked about what happened at this intersection, we understood and it was highlighted that equity has to be a main component of that conversation. You can't do the work, as one participant in the cohort said, you can't do the work of reconnecting young people from Black, African American, Indigenous, any communities of color without addressing the specific reasons as to why they were not connected in the first place. And so we understand that equity is a core component of the conversations that we've had over the past 2 days and over the past year, and will be a part of how we set those goals moving forward. So we asked organizations, going back one slide, we asked organizations, where do you sit at the intersection of youth development and nature engagement? Do you have a higher focus on youth development, like Big Brothers Big Sisters, or do you have a higher focus on nature engagement, for instance, like Park Pride? We did this as a starting point with a hope that we could talk about where organizations could grow once they learned from each other and learned about the strategies that were brought out in the literature review. So we asked ourselves, what's happening at the intersection that works? What are the goalposts that we can aim towards? What can we learn from as best practices and examples? In the literature review, we found that program elements that lead to success, and in conversation, we found that program elements that lead to success include integrating unique opportunities provided by nature, consistent time for individual and group reflection, providing space that affirms young people's identities, perspectives, and leadership, and inclusively and intentionally building relationships, not only with young people, but with their families and communities as a whole. Some of the outcomes that happen at this intersection of youth development and nature-based programming include are bunched into categories of personal development, agency, connection to place and community, and leadership skills, with the subcategories that you see on the side: deeper understanding of self, environmental ethos, nature appreciation, greater confidence, self-efficacy, resilience, conservation and environmental justice orientation, social skills, decision-making, adaptability, stronger relationships, a sense of belonging and place, and intentionally addressing systemic racism and separation from land. One of the things that we did learn, that we did the literature review, we found out that that our idea of shifting the focus of our work and the emphasis on this intersection began to give us the framework of using nature-based programming as a tool for holistic youth development with equity at its roots. Understanding that if our goal is healthy, whole, complete young adults or youth and young adults, that equity has to be at the base and nature can be a vehicle and an avenue for that. And that folks who work in nature-based programs can use youth development tools and positive youth development approaches to incorporate into their programs, and vice versa. We also realized that the research that currently exists is incomplete. It's still growing, and this research set could have some continued and added learning. We realized that at the intersection, some of the important things that came out of the folks who participated in the action area were the idea of inclusive relationships. So folks with opposing views, folks with disabilities, folks with different racial and ethnic backgrounds. Folks expressed a gratitude for connection and conversation with other organizations who come from different backgrounds and could speak to that, who could bring that expertise to the table. We realized that there is an importance in building equitable partnerships with other organizations and building relationships with community. No matter what aspect of this intersection you come from, the idea of building equitable partnerships and relationships was central in terms of making sure that the intersection could exist at its highest efficiency or could be accomplished to its highest intent. We also realized that this conversation and this exchange between organizations here, one page back, was a sense of affirmation and regrounding that this is not brand new work. We're not expressing something that is completely brand new. What we're trying to do is make sure that the expertise that exists in one space and the expertise that exists in another are able to coincide, are able to exist in the same space, again, for the development of holistic and healthy youth and communities. So this framework is an effort to help prioritize and clarify some of the strategies and metrics that organizations are able to use in their work. And again, understanding how equity shows up in the idea of reconnecting to land and the disparities and disproportionate access to land that currently exists. And we weren't afraid to be uncomfortable. So we're inspired by some of the challenges and gaps that we face. We understand that in this work, whenever we talk about equity, there is a need for allies to become accomplices. So white allies and nonprofits are challenged to continue learning about systemic racism and oppression that affects connection to nature and youth development. We talked about elements that allow youth to show up as full individuals, with their full selves and identities, and all of the contexts that affect the way that people connect both to nature and to their better selves. And then the need for white researchers and practitioners to examine their own practice and reflexivity. The question was asked, why more research? Which is an acknowledgement and frustration of how research has been done on communities as opposed to research being done with communities, research that supports or feeds the community's growth and is driven or inspired by their needs, wants, and desires. So what's next? Moving forward, we hope to continue to update and add to this framework. Like you said, like you just saw over the past 2 days, we've had so many pieces of information that have been shared that add to what has been developed through the literature review. So upgrading and adding to the framework and to the research. We also plan to keep in touch with this action area and to have a 6-month check-in on action steps, 6 months and 12 months, to check in on the status of the intentional integration goals. And next month, we will also be hosting a webinar with the framework to share the information with a wider audience to get as much input as possible and to continue to update and make it a tool that can be useful for folks beyond those who attended this summit.
I would also like to say thank you again to our incredible sponsors and partners, our presenting sponsors, Playcore and the Pisces Foundation. Thank you so much, and to everyone else who has been such great partners along the way. And so again, this is not goodbye. Please join us for the networking session, and we'll be getting started in about 30 minutes for those. So thanks so much, everybody, and looking forward to seeing everybody in just a little bit.